There are stories in the archives of American crime that refuse to settle. They are the cases that do not simply fade into the cold case files, but instead remain vibrant and terrifying, pulsing with a darkness that feels immediate even decades later. We are accustomed to the concept of the missing person. We understand, intellectually, that the wilderness is vast and that human beings are fragile. Hikers lose the trail, drivers lose control on icy roads, and sometimes tragic accidents swallow lives whole. In those instances, the narrative is sad, but it is logical. It follows the brutal but predictable rules of cause and effect. But then, there are the anomalies. Some events defy physics, logic, and human psychology so completely that they feel less like crimes and more like glitches in reality itself. The case we are examining tonight is the definitive example of such an anomaly. It is a story that has haunted the Sierra Nevada foothills for nearly 50 years, not because of what we don't know, but because of the terrifying contradictions of what we do know. On a crisp, clear Friday night in February 1978, 5 men left a basketball game in Chico, California. They were friends, bound by a shared history and a deep reliance-based camaraderie. They were headed home to Yuba City, a simple 50-mile drive south along a flat, well-lit highway. They were happy. They were victorious. They had snacks for the road and plans for the next day. But they never arrived. Instead of driving home, they drove into a nightmare. They ascended thousands of feet into the teeth of a brewing blizzard, navigating a treacherous, winding mountain track they had no business being on. And when their car was finally found, it was not wrecked. It was not out of gas. It was simply stopped. The men had abandoned a perfectly functional vehicle, a warm steel shelter stocked with food and fuel, to walk out into the freezing darkness of the Plumas National Forest. What followed was a slow-motion tragedy of starvation, freezing, and madness that has baffled investigators, psychologists, and armchair detectives for generations. Why did they leave the car? Why did they walk uphill into the snow? And most hauntingly, why did some of them eventually find a cabin stocked with a year's supply of food and a heating system, only to starve to death without ever opening a can or turning a valve? This is not just a story about getting lost. This is a story about fear. It is a story about a terror so absolute that it overrode the most basic biological imperative to survive. Tonight, on Midnight Monologues, we are going back to 1978. We are going to drive that dark road to Oroville. We are going to sit in the silence of the snowbound trailer. And we are going to try to answer the question that has hung over this case like a shroud. What were they running from? To understand the magnitude of the disaster, we must first deeply understand the men who vanished. History has often been unkind to the Yuba County Five, frequently reducing them to caricatures. In the initial press coverage of 1978, and indeed in many retellings since, they have been dismissed with derogatory terms labeled as dim-witted, slow, or perpetual children. This reductionist view is not only disrespectful, it is forensically dangerous because it obscures the truth. It suggests that their deaths were simply the result of incompetence, of 5 men who didn't know enough to come in out of the rain. But when we strip away the prejudice of the era and look at the facts, we see a group of functioning, capable adults who possessed specific skills, routines, and a profound loyalty to one another. The group was anchored by Ted Weir. At 32 years old, Ted was a man of contradictions. Physically, he was imposing, tall and strong, but emotionally, he was the gentle giant of the group. Friends and family described him as lacking a social filter. He took the world literally. If a sign said, "Stop," Ted stopped, and he wouldn't move until the rules told him it was safe to do so. He was a man who craved structure and thrived on the predictability of his life. He was employed, he was reliable, and he was deeply loved by those who understood his gentle nature. The idea that Ted would spontaneously decide to go on a joyride into the mountains is fundamentally at odds with his psychological profile. Ted did not take risks. Ted followed the plan. Then there was Jack Madruga, age 30. Jack is perhaps the most critical figure in understanding the initial deviation from the route. Jack was the driver. He was the only member of the group with a valid driver's license, and he was the owner of the vehicle they took that night, a 1969 Mercury Montego. Jack was an Army veteran, and like Ted, he was a man of specific habits. However, Jack's habits were centered on pride and independence. He was incredibly particular about his car. It was his sanctuary. He kept it washed, waxed, and mechanically sound. He famously forbade eating in the car because he couldn't stand the mess. Jack was not a man who would recklessly drive his prized possession up a rocky, snow-covered cow trail in the middle of the night. He was a man who stuck to the pavement. The very fact that his car was found on that mountain road is evidence of extreme duress. Bill Sterling, 29, was the spiritual center of the group. A deeply religious man, Bill spent his free time visiting local nursing homes to read the Bible to the elderly. He was known for his empathy and his pacifism. Bill was not a fighter. In a situation of conflict or danger, Bill would likely freeze or look to others for protection. He was close with Jack Madruga, and the two were often seen together. His presence in the car guaranteed a calming influence, making the eventual descent into panic even more perplexing. Jack Hewitt, 24, was the youngest and perhaps the most vulnerable of the five. He struggled more significantly with coordination and speech than the others and relied heavily on the support of his family and his friends. Jack Hewitt was a follower in the truest sense. He would not have been the one to suggest a detour, nor would he have been the one to lead a hike into the snow. In a crisis, he would have clung to the group, mirroring their actions. Finally, there was Gary Matias. At 25, Gary was the enigma. Unlike the others, Gary did not have developmental delays. His challenges were psychiatric. He had served in the army in Germany, where he had developed a drug problem that triggered latent schizophrenia. He had been discharged and sent home, where he had struggled with violent outbursts and psychosis. However, and this is the crucial point, by February 1978, Gary Matias was a success story. He had been stable for 2 years. He was taking his medication, stelazine and cogentin, religiously. He was working at his stepfather's gardening business. He was lucid, coherent, and functioning at a high level. Moreover, Gary was the only one in the car with military survival training. He knew how to navigate, how to ration food, and how to survive in the cold. If anyone could have saved the group, it was Gary. These 5 men were brought together by the Gateway Projects, a program in Yuba City that provided them with employment and a social network. They were not just co-workers, they were teammates. They played for the Gateway Gators basketball team, a source of immense pride for all of them. In fact, the catalyst for the events of February 24th was their love of the game. They had a major tournament scheduled for the very next morning, Saturday, February 25th. The prize for winning the tournament was a free week in Los Angeles, a trip they had been talking about for weeks. They had their uniforms laid out on their beds at home. They had packed their bags. The anticipation for Saturday's game was the dominant emotion in their lives. This context is vital because it underscores the impossibility of their choosing to run away. They had everything to live for the next day. They were not men looking for an escape. They were men looking forward to a victory. The evening began with perfect normalcy. The 5 men piled into Jack Madruga's turquoise and white Mercury Montego and drove the 50 miles north to Chico to watch the UC Davis versus Chico state basketball game. They arrived at the gym, found their seats, and enjoyed the match. Witnesses who saw them at the game reported absolutely nothing unusual. They were cheering for UC Davis, they were laughing, they were high-fiving. When Davis won the game, the men were ecstatic. They left the gymnasium in high spirits, buzzing with the energy of the win and the anticipation of their own game the next morning. After leaving the university campus, they made a stop at Bears Market in downtown Chico. This stop is forensically significant because it establishes a precise timeline and inventory. The clerk, who knew the men by sight, rang them up. They bought a Hostess cherry pie, a Langendorf lemon pie, a Snickers bar, a Marathon bar, and 2 cans of Pepsi. These were snacks for the ride home. The time was roughly 10 p.m. The weather in the valley was clear and mild, though a storm front was moving in over the mountains to the east. At this moment, everything was right in their world. They were 5 friends with snacks, a good car, and an hour-long drive on a flat, easy highway back to their warm beds. To get home to Yuba City from Chico, the route is simple. You get on Highway 99 and drive south. It is a straight, well-lit, busy road. You cannot get lost on it, but they didn't take Highway 99. This is the moment the mystery truly begins. Instead of turning south, the Mercury Montego turned east. They drove out of Chico and onto the Oroville-Quincy Highway. This is not a road you take by accident. It requires a deliberate series of turns to access. As they drove east, they began to climb. The topography of Northern California changes rapidly here. You leave the agricultural flatlands and enter the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. The road begins to wind. The lights of the towns fade away, replaced by the encroaching walls of the pine forest. As they ascended, the weather turned. The storm that had been forecast began to dump snow on the higher elevations. The paved road gave way to broken asphalt, and then, as they climbed past the 2,000-foot mark, it turned into a gravel and dirt logging track known as Ponderosa Way. This road is treacherous even in daylight and good weather. In a heavy sedan like a Mercury Montego at night in a snowstorm, it is a nightmare. The car's suspension would have been hammering against rocks. The tires would have been slipping. The darkness would have been absolute, the headlights carving a tunnel through the falling snow. For Jack Madruga, the man who obsessed over his car's condition, this drive would have been torture. Every scrape of a branch against the paint, every thud of a rock against the undercarriage would have been a source of extreme anxiety. Yet, he kept driving. They drove past the last signs of civilization. They drove past the snow line. They climbed to an elevation of 4,400 feet deep into the wilderness. Why? Why did they keep going? Why didn't they turn around when the pavement ended? Why didn't they turn around when the snow started to stick? The distance from the turnoff to where the car was found is over 30 miles. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a sustained hour-long drive into oblivion. The only logical explanation that fits the psychological profile of the driver is that he felt he could not turn around. He was being forced. Whether by someone in the car or someone in a vehicle behind them, Jack Madruga was driving under duress. Eventually, the Montego could go no further. The tires lost traction in a patch of slushy snow. The car spun slightly and settled. It was not a crash. The car wasn't buried. It wasn't hung up on a log. It was simply stuck in a drift that, under normal circumstances, 5 strong men could have pushed it out in 5 minutes. But they didn't push. They turned off the engine. They left the keys in the ignition or in a pocket. Accounts vary, but the keys were not lost. They got out of the car. They didn't take their heavy coats. They didn't take the maps. They left the uneaten pies and candy bars on the seats. And they walked away. If the story ended there, it would be baffling enough. But it doesn't, because there was someone else on that mountain. Joseph Shones was a 55-year-old resident of Berry Creek, a small hamlet in the foothills. Shones was a man with a complicated reputation. He was known to be a heavy drinker, argumentative, and prone to telling tall tales. On the night of February 24th, Shones claimed he had driven his Volkswagen Beetle up that same remote road to check the snow line for a potential family cabin trip. This explanation has always been viewed with skepticism by investigators. Who drives up a dangerous mountain road in a blizzard at night just to check the snow? Was Shones meeting someone? Was he up to something illicit? Whatever his reasons, Shones claimed that around 5:30 p.m., hours before the boys arrived, his Beetle got stuck in a snowdrift. He tried to push it out, but the exertion triggered a heart attack. He felt a crushing pain in his chest. Terrified and alone, he crawled back into his car, started the engine to run the heater, and lay there, waiting for help or death. 6 hours passed. Shones lay in the dark, the snow piling up around his little car. Then, around midnight, he saw lights. In his rearview mirror, he saw a pair of headlights approaching. It was the Mercury Montego. It pulled up behind him and stopped. The headlights went dark. Shones claimed he saw the interior dome light of the Mercury flicker on as the doors opened. He saw figures moving in the snow. He heard voices, desperate for salvation. Shones claimed he forced himself out of his car. He stumbled toward the voices, screaming into the wind. "Help me! I've had a heart attack! I need help!" And this is where the nightmare deepens. Shones said that as soon as he called out, the lights went out. The voices stopped. The figures went silent. They did not come to help him. They did not ask who he was. They simply retreated into the shadows. But Shones' story didn't stop there. In later retellings, and he told this story many times with many variations, he added a detail that changes the entire complexion of the case. He claimed that parked a little further up the road, just beyond the reach of the headlights, was a red pickup truck. He described seeing the 5 men walk toward this truck. He claimed that in the glow of the truck's lights, he saw a woman holding a baby. He watched as the 5 men stood by the truck talking to the occupants before walking off into the darkness of the forest. The red truck theory is the most polarizing element of the Yuba County Five mystery. Was it real? Or was it a hallucination brought on by pain and fear? Or was it a lie? If the red truck was real, it implies that the boys were not alone. It implies that they met someone on that mountain. Were they lured there? Was this a drug deal gone wrong? Was the woman with the baby a way to compel the boys to stop, a classic roadside ruse used to lower the guard of unsuspecting victims? Shones' behavior after this encounter is equally suspicious. He claimed he lay in his car until it ran out of gas in the early morning. Then, despite having just suffered a massive heart attack, he walked 8 miles down the mountain in the snow, wearing only loafers and light clothing. This physical feat is medically improbable for a man in his condition. On his way down, he passed the abandoned Mercury Montego. He claimed he looked inside. He told reporters he saw baby clothes on the seats, a detail that police never found and which the families denied. When Shones finally reached the Mountain House Lodge, a local bar and restaurant, he did not act like a man in crisis. He didn't scream that there were 5 boys stranded in the snow. He didn't tell anyone about the car. He ordered a soda and some aspirin, sat quietly, and then got a ride home. He didn't go to the hospital until the next day. Why did Joseph Shones stay silent? Why did he wait until the search was underway to come forward? And why did his story keep changing? Some believe Shones was simply a confused, sick man. Others believe he was a witness to a crime and was terrified of the people in the red truck. And a few believe that Shones himself was involved, that his presence on the road was not a coincidence, and that his heart attack was a cover for something far more sinister. The disappearance of the 5 men triggered a massive search operation. Police and volunteers combed the woods, but a severe blizzard blanketed the area, burying any tracks or evidence under feet of snow. The car was found on February 28th, 4 days after they vanished. It was pristine. The windows were rolled down, letting the snow inside. The food was there. The gas was there. But the forest was silent. Months passed. The seasons turned. The snow began to melt. And in June 1978, the forest finally gave up its dead. A group of motorcyclists riding deep in the backcountry, nearly 19 miles from where the car was found, stumbled upon a derelict trailer maintained by the Forest Service. It was a seasonal outpost, meant for rangers in the summer. It was remote, isolated, and hidden from the road. Inside the trailer, they found the body of Ted Weir. The scene within that trailer is one of the most disturbing tableaus in forensic history. Ted Weir was found lying on a bed, his body wrapped tightly in 8 separate sheets, swaddled like a mummy. His feet were black with severe frostbite, but the autopsy revealed that the cold hadn't killed him. Ted Weir had starved to death. He had lost nearly 100 pounds. His body had consumed its own muscle and tissue in a desperate attempt to stay alive. Experts estimated he had lived in that trailer for anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. The horror of Ted Weir's death lies in the resources that surrounded him. The trailer was not empty. First, there was food. Just outside the trailer, in a storage shed that had been opened, was a massive stockpile of sea rations, military canned food. There was enough food in that shed to keep all 5 men alive for a year. A few cans had been opened and eaten, but dozens remained untouched. Second, there was heat. The trailer was equipped with a propane heating system. The tank outside was full. All Ted had to do was turn a single valve, and gas would have flowed to the heater. He never touched it. Third, there was fire. There were matches, paper, and plenty of wooden furniture that could have been broken down and burned in the fireplace. No fire was ever lit. Ted Weir lay in that bed, slowly dying of hunger and cold, while the means to save himself were within arm's reach. Why? The psychological concept of learned helplessness is often cited here. The theory goes that Ted, without the specific instructions of his caretakers or parents, simply didn't know he was allowed to eat the food or use the gas. He waited for permission that never came. But this theory collapses when we consider who else was there. Inside the trailer, investigators found the tennis shoes of Gary Matias. This is the smoking gun. Gary Matias, the Army veteran, the man who knew how to survive, was in the trailer. He had removed his wet sneakers and seemingly put on a pair of sturdy leather boots that belonged to the Forest Service, boots that were missing from the scene. If Gary was there, why didn't he turn on the gas? He knew how. Why didn't he open the cans? He knew how. The failure to use the resources suggests that the men were not just lost, they were hiding. Survival psychologists tell us that people do not starve in the presence of food unless they believe that the act of eating or the act of revealing their location will result in a worse fate. Were they afraid that the smoke from a fire would be seen? Were they afraid that the noise of opening the shed would be heard? Were they listening to footsteps outside in the snow? The evidence suggests a siege mentality. They believed that the people from the road, the people in the red truck, were still out there, hunting them. The bodies of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling were found later, scattered in the woods between the car and the trailer. They had died of exposure during the 19-mile hike. They had likely sat down to rest in the snow and drifted off into the final sleep of hypothermia. Jack Hewitt's remains were found just 2 miles from the trailer. His own father, who had joined the search every single day, was the one who found his son's backbone and shoes under a manzanita bush. It was a tragic, heartbreaking end. But Gary Matias was never found. The fate of Gary Matias is the final lingering question. Did he watch his friends die one by one? Did he care for Ted Weir, wrapping him in those sheets, feeding him the few cans they managed to open until his own mental state collapsed? Without his medication, Gary's schizophrenia would have returned with a vengeance. Did he descend into psychosis? Did he come to believe the food was poisoned? Did he believe the heater was a trap? Or was Gary the hero of the story? Did he stay with Ted until the very end, and then, knowing Ted was gone, did he lace up those stolen boots and walk out into the melting snow to try and find help? Did he walk until he couldn't walk anymore, dying somewhere in the deep ravines where no searcher has ever looked? Or, as some darker theories suggest, did Gary survive? Did he walk out of the woods and disappear into a new life, leaving his past and his friends behind? Over the years, many theories have been proposed to explain the unexplainable. The town bully theory suggests that the men were harassed in Oroville by locals who saw them as easy targets. There were rumors in the months following the disappearance that a local bad actor had bragged about chasing those boys up the mountain. If this is true, it explains everything. It explains the high-speed drive into the mountains. It explains the abandonment of the car. If the bullies were right behind them, the car was a coffin. It explains the walk into the woods and the refusal to light a fire. They were hiding from men who wanted to hurt them. Another theory involves a drug deal gone wrong. Did one of the men know someone? Was the meeting with the red truck planned? This seems unlikely given the men's backgrounds. But in the drug-fueled haziness of the 1970s, innocent people often got caught in the crossfire of things they didn't understand. And then there is the theory of the group psychosis. Did the stress of the storm and the wrong turn trigger a collective panic? Did the group dynamic, so reliant on structure, collapse into chaos? Did they simply make one bad decision after another until it was too late to turn back? The sheriff of Yuba County at the time, Jack Beecham, was a man who had seen everything, but this case shook him. He famously stated, "There was some force that made those men go up there. They were scared to death." He knew that simple confusion didn't fit the facts. He knew that men don't walk 19 miles in the snow unless they are running for their lives. As we stand here today, nearly 50 years later, the silence of the Plumas National Forest is as heavy as it was on that night in 1978. The trees have grown back over the logging road. The trailer is long gone, reclaimed by the elements, but the questions remain, etched into the landscape. The tragedy of the Yuba County Five is not just in the loss of life, but in the loss of reason. It is a story that strips away our confidence in the rational world. We want to believe that if we have food, we will eat. If we have heat, we will turn it on. If we have a car, we will drive it. But that night, 5 men broke all those rules. I think of Ted Weir lying in that dark room, waiting. I think of Jack Madruga, the proud driver, walking away from his beloved car. I think of Bill Sterling and Jack Hewitt fading into the snow. And I think of Gary Matias, the ghost who walked away. Did they see something on that road that broke their minds? Or was the monster simply the indifferent cruelty of nature? We may never know. The red truck is gone. Joseph Shones took his secrets to the grave, and the woods keep their own counsel. This case serves as a terrifying reminder of how thin the veil of civilization truly is. One wrong turn, one bad decision, one encounter with the wrong stranger, and the world we know can dissolve, leaving us alone in the dark, walking toward a shelter that cannot save us. If this deep dive into the psychological abyss of the Yuba County Five has kept you on the edge of your seat, then you are part of the Midnight Monologues family. We exist to shine a light into the darkest corners of history, to explore the stories that others forget. Please, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. It helps us continue this work. And I need to hear your voice in the comments. Tell me, what is your theory? Who is in the red truck? And where is Gary Matias? Stay safe, stay curious, and remember, when the road ends, the mystery begins. Good night.